Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to session 21 in room two. My goodness, I've got some catching up to do. Um, it's a pleasure, a privilege, in fact, to be asked to chair this session. Thank you for asking, and thanks for everyone who submitted to it. The panel is entitled Spiritual Encounters. Um, so I hope that everybody is prepared, engaged, excited, curious, possibly skeptical, however you wish to come at it. Um, and we're going to start with a presentation from Kevin Ellis, Dr. Reverend Kevin Ellis, as he now is. This is rather exciting. And in fact, that's what this is going to address, Kevin, correct? This is about completing your second PhD in the relation between autoethnography and theology, or autoethnographies and theologies, and attempting to show and reveal the gifts that each discipline can offer the other.
Yes, I believe so. First of all, my name's Kevin. I'm a vicar in North Wales in the beautiful historic town of Conwy. And I live hemmed in inside by the castle, and that's who I am. And I've completed my first PhD was in biblical studies many years ago, and I taught for a bit at HE level, and then wanted to do a second PhD to keep my grey cells going, as it were. And I went to a small institute in Sheffield to do that. And they asked me about methodology. And at that time, I'd never heard of autoethnography. But then the pandemic struck, and I was confined to barracks for about 12 months. And I think I read every major autoethnographic book that was out at the time, just trying to get to grips with what they were asking me to do. And so I came up with something called granular autoethnography, which uh, uh, bears, I guess, commonality with autoethnography in general, being the crucible where the researcher and the context meet. But I was very concerned as a parish vicar, as a priest, that lots of my autoethnographic thoughts actually came out of conversations with other people. So lots of ethical questions, but also questions about how I might do this. And so I came up with five principles which have satisfied the examiners, and I graduated last week. So therefore, and they were picking up on the autoethnographic epiphanic moments, epiphany really. I guess I was borrowing a word back from the autoethnographer and back into the life of a Christian context. Acknowledging that for me, the discovery of autoethnography has been profoundly life-changing. The second contour was the personal experience of the researcher within a particular context. So acknowledging quite deeply that all I was doing in the context was I was doing with others. But unlike some forms of autoethnography, I was particularly interested in my ordinary everyday engagements with people, not where life events had happened, like a death or a birth or a marriage, but just the everyday nitty gritty of maybe sitting down and having a pint or a coffee. And so the granular autoethnography came from having a slow and measured pace that which probably fits me quite well because I speak slowly, as you've already discovered, with lots of pauses and breathing, and sometimes people not being sure whether I'm going to quite finish the sentence or not. But the whole business of just being slow, sometimes maybe a bit ponderous. But you have to imagine the world where I'd come from. My initial research was based solely on books, solely on ancient manuscripts, and often working in a room just by myself. So, in actual fact, to find myself researching, even reflecting upon my own personal experiences, which is the hallmark of autoethnography, but seeing that as something really important, and I hope that I have convinced some of the practical and contextual theologians to take the discipline of autoethnography seriously. And my aim is to persuade 2 or 3 of them to come with me next year to this conference so that we can further engage with the autoethnographic world. I think that's enough for now.
Thank you, Kevin. The order now in the book has Kevin next, but after some discussion, we wondered if we could move to having Elyse present second, please, and then come back to Kevin for the third.
Yes, happy to do so. And it's a delight to be on a panel with you, Vicar. My very first one of these was when I heard you present actually about the funerals in Wales, and was just so drawn to your work that I'm really glad I get to sit here and listen to you on both sides of what I'm going to share. Breath and bone. My first consult with an orthopedic surgeon verified what I had suspected, what I had felt in my bones increasingly over 3 years of decreasing mobility and deferred health maintenance. X-rays showed that due to rapid osteoarthritis, my deteriorating hip bones, ball and socket would, sooner rather than later, be incapable of supporting unassisted daily movements like getting up and down from a chair, or a toilet, or sidestepping in and out of a car, or bending to put on socks, or ever wearing lace-up shoes again, or stepping into a bath, or climbing a set of stairs, or walking a block, or rolling over in bed. At this stage, the only effective means of intervention or even pain management, really, was total surgical replacement of both hips. The head of your femur should be round like a light bulb, the surgeon explained, with a cradle of cartilage that cushions your movement, but you no longer have any cartilage. That's what bone on bone means. There's not a breadth of cartilage remaining, and instead of resembling a light bulb, the femoral heads of both of your hip bones now look like the tapered end of an egg, and they're increasingly fragile. It was a compelling argument. We scheduled the surgeries 4 months apart and surrounded them on all sides pre and post-op with physical therapy. We cradled them, as it were, to cushion my recovery with 7 months of in-person, hands-on rehabilitation at the same facility and primarily with the same practitioner, Dr. Aaron. This is my first narrative pass through this multi-year arc of temporary disability, surgery, and recovery. The broader story of breath and bone that is beginning to knit itself into my awareness grows more layered every time that I turn to it, and isn't that kind of the rigor of autoethnography? I'm beginning to wonder if this recovery is less surgical than it is incarnational, in the metaphysical sense of reclaiming embodied being. But like my bones themselves, I have not fully reconstituted myself on the flip side of this hybridized upgrade of bones and metal bars, and I need a little bit more time to integrate the me, not me, used to being me, is it me again aspects of this body. So I am making today a very modest beginning in that piece, in a place that is tangible, relational, and I think for me, foundational. These are 3 stories from physical therapy that I'm calling Breathing with the Bone Setter. 1. Take a good breath now and make it pretty. A landmark in post-surgical hip replacement therapy is the day you get to park your walker on the side and engage in a little bit of freestyle floor exercise. Now, one of these is a balance sequence that culminates over time in standing one-legged on a very squishy foam cushion for 30-second increments while playing balloon volleyball with a partner. This bit of play activates the intricate system of shifting focus, shifting weight, muscle adjustment that are required to walk upright safely and unassisted, and which prior to the onset of arthritis, much less surgery, I had taken entirely for granted. Because I'm a fall risk, I begin this practice between a set of parallel bars that I can grab onto while my body tries to relearn weight bearing and alignment. Now, I have to pause the story for a moment and tell you that 50 years ago, I spent over a decade of my childhood and adolescence standing at a bar in classical ballet classes, multiple hours after school, 5 nights a week, because my best and inseparable girlfriend at the time was the dance teacher's daughter. And so everywhere that she went, I went along with her. That story. And so while I can credit my formative years in ballet class with instilling what I told Aaron on that first day as a heightened attunement to the kinesthetics of my body as a musculoskeletal system negotiating space with others. And it made us both laugh. I have not set hand on a ballet bar in 5 decades. But let me tell you that the first time that I took my place between those bars and placed my fingertips lightly upon it, I felt a rush of energy from the ground up as if the marrow in my bones had electrified. I felt an upsurge of muscle memory and the uprise of a body from memory, strong, centered, limitlessly flexible, laser focused, pulled up and on point. And over the next several days, this resurrected ballet body from history batted balloons with aplomb, holding my balance without a wobble as if my stand leg were a titanium steel rod sunk deep into earth. Make it pretty now, Elyse, Aaron would say, tossing me a balloon, because you can't give it flourish if you don't have foundation. You only make it pretty after you stick the landing. And even though I was a chubby 66-year-old with scars like lightning bolts running down both hips, standing barefoot and one-legged on an old blue foam cushion, juggling balloons, in my experience of my body, in the experience of embodiment that Aaron had set up for me in that first week freestanding, I was dancing the Sugar Plum Fairy. And I was making it pretty. 2. Under our breath, speaking unspoken. It had been a bad day. Nothing in particular, everything at once. It was a day defeated by incremental progress, a day raw with the latest political cruelties, a day permeated by helplessness in all directions. I'm lying on my treatment table, and the man on the table next to me, not 4 feet away, is getting electrical stimulation therapy. He has wires attached to parts of his legs, connecting to a box with dials that his DPT is monitoring, which I assume is sending electrical currents through his body. And I don't know why this image strikes me so sharply, but by the time Aaron comes over, I am jittery, my muscles micro flinching, skittish under the skin. And she notices as soon as she lays hands. So I try to cover up and I say, it's that Frankenstein machine next door. You know, that electrical thing, it is just so freaky. Truly, Aaron, just last night, I had a nightmare. I had a nightmare and I came in and you all just scooped me up and hooked me up to an electrical thing and electrocuted me, and it looks just like that, and it's really freaking me out. So you're not going to do that, right? Like, you're not going to do that, right? I mean, you're not going to strap me down and electrocute me, right? And then I closed my eyes and I just let some deep sorrow leak out, some unexpected sorrow, deeper than marrow from a whale. I thought I had dried out. And Erin just kept her hands on her work, eyes slightly averted as her fingers massaged their way along my incision scars. No one here will do anything against your consent. You are always in charge of your own healing. And then quietly, with neither judgment nor indulgence, she simply held space for my quiet, leaky disintegration, smoothing out the puckers and the wrinkles along the line of incision, kneading against adhesion she could feel forming where scar tissue, those remnants of past wounds, can attach permanently and restrict range of movement ever afterwards. And when at last I noticed that my breathing had slowed and synchronized, she said in a clear directive, cushioned by consent, "Okay then, whenever you're ready." 3. "Stop holding your breath, you're guarding." I snarl this at myself in a fit of impatience and embarrassment. I am standing in front of the rope ladder, unable to lift my foot to take that first step, struck motionless by the fear of falling. This is another watershed moment in PT hip recovery, the rope ladder. At least that's what I call it. Laid out flat on the floor in front of me, it is a device to practice my gait, walking unassisted, stride length, weight shift, 1 footfall in each square, stepping over a dowel. It looks for a moment like hopscotch, but I am feeling it like an obstacle course because for some reason I am standing there frozen, virtually unable to raise my leg to take that first step. And I know I always hesitate at the first time I try things. And I know I have been scooting around here for weeks with my walker like I am the ever-ready granny returning to ballet class. But this feels different, Erin. Every time I shift my weight onto my surgical leg and try to lift the other off the ground, I feel a force field of resistance and fear that takes my breath away. What is the matter with me? "Take a breath, Elyse," Erin says, with a cushion of kindness around her own impatience. "Of course you're guarding. We've talked about this. Your body has been working so hard and so effectively for years to compensate for bone loss and to protect you from falling. Your brain has systematically reassigned what muscles hold you up, which allow you to move. The body has a mind and a memory of its own. It adjusts by necessity, but it learns by repetition. You know this. Give your body a little time just for it to practice feeling safe." And so I looked at that rope ladder laid out in front of me. And I think how rehabilitation is about renewing the body's trust in itself, in its resilience after fracture, in its innate movement toward healing and wholeness, and its creative potential for reanimation. My body has its own bone magic, and the best medicine I can offer right now is just the time and the breathing state to allow it to practice it in peace. And with that, I take a good breath and I ask my foot to release itself from the ground.
So we're going to come back to Kevin now. Please, Tech Squad, for Kevin's second presentation, Breathing with the Divine. As a teaser, the questions are: do I breathe differently with the divine if I am doing it as Kevin the autoethnographer or as Kevin the priest? Am I abdicating my own responsibilities or allowing myself to be diminished if I somehow intimate that another breathes through me? Please take it away, Kevin.
I don't know, that teasing might be the best bit. Thank you for allowing me to present something else. It comes from my work as a priest. Sunday by Sunday, we gather as a worshiping community to celebrate Holy Communion, and I will stand behind the holy table, the altar, and I will pronounce forgiveness and pronounce blessing. But when I share bread and wine, I will say a very lengthy prayer, and I'll stand in a cruciform position with my arms outstretched. And that is very Anglican, very Catholic. And so at that moment, I guess I am the host, I am representing Christ. And there is that whole question within that physical act of saying, what am I doing? Who am I representing? And do I cease to be, in some sense, Kevin, the human being? Now, when I was first ordained, which was over 20 years ago now, I was invited to a mothers' union group. And when I protested and said that I wasn't a mother, nor ever likely to be, the head of the local mothers' union said, yes, but you're allowed because you are clergy, men, women, and clergy. I didn't realize that being ordained admitted me to a different gender or subspecies. But I do represent a faith where the writings of the New Testament, St. Paul is quite prominent, and he does say, it is no longer I that live, but Christ who lives in me, from the book of Galatians, if you're really interested. And for me, that wrestle of when I'm inviting people to open themselves to the Christian faith, what am I inviting them to do? Am I inviting them to lose themselves? And in what sense is that liberative? And in what sense is that proclaiming some sort of captivity? And I guess that both online and in the physical space in Bristol, there'll be lots of different answers to that question. And but Paul also says that the good sometimes that he wants to do, he can't do, and is wrestling with himself. And a bit like if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, in I think the second or third episode, Gollum or Smeagol has to decide whether he is good or not good. Now, I might be the first person ever to have compared St. Paul with Gollum, and I hope that people will forgive me for doing so. But for me, there is a wrestling between the priest and the autoethnographer. Not mutually exclusive, but sometimes as the priest, I am asking people to follow a different path than they would choose. But as an autoethnographer, I have come to find a discipline that is liberating and freeing and life-giving. So I approach my autoethnography as a priest with lots and lots of questions. I do want to say, as a priest, probably my bishop would be pleased to know that I find in my faith something life-giving, life-enhancing, and holy celebratory. And yet, I am aware there is this tension when I act as an autoethnographer, because one of the hallmarks of autoethnography, it seems to me, is to be the prophet, to call people to account, to be the truth teller. And sometimes, sadly, that is not found with the institutions of church or other religious institution. So as I breathe with the divine, in what sense do I stop being me? Or in what sense do I become me more fully as I allow the prophetic spirit of the Old Testament and of Jesus to flow through my veins as I proclaim? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Three very interesting, very deep, and very engaging, thought-provoking presentations there. I'm just going to check quickly with Jesse to see if Anson is.
Hi, it's Jamie here. Good to see you all, and thank you, Kevin and Elyse, for your presentations, which were fantastic. And Elyse, I especially appreciate your presentation and the fact that you were saying, this is the first time that you've kind of, begun to work through this in your narrative. I think you described it like a narrative arc, and yeah, so I appreciate us being trusted with that as well. So a couple of different questions, I suppose. The first, I think, is, well, maybe they're the same, actually. So Elyse, I'm interested in terms of the journey that you've been on over the last year. And because your background and your expertise is so much rooted in embodiment and performance, the body is so central to you and to your life, your work. And I'm interested to know if you could speak a little bit more, and of course this came across in what you presented as well, but specifically what you've learnt about embodiment over the last year that perhaps has been a new part of your learning journey. So something that you didn't perhaps know before this time, but that you've entered into in terms of embodiment. I think actually I'll leave that question there. Kevin, maybe I'll come back with another question for you a bit later if nobody asks, if there's time. But yeah, Elyse, perhaps I can start with that.
Really lovely question, Jamie. Thank you. Part of why this feels like a first pass through is I am just sorting what those lessons are. So there's a way in which, of course I knew it. When Aaron says to me, you know this. Yeah, I know it, but to confront it feelingly, physically, spiritually, what it means is to know it in a different way. I did not really account for the ways in which my body can fight against my mind, right? Because if you simply will it, I can make my body do it. That is part of the discipline, right, of being a dancer or whatever. If I will it, I can train my body to do it. So that moment when I cannot pick up my leg, when it really feels like the signal of my brain will not make it move, that body has mind of its own, it is in a reality where to lift my foot up means I could fall. And that sense of protection, I had never encountered that before, where I was momentarily at war with, where pushing harder, discipline was not going to solve it. Just letting it be was the only way through. So that was really very unique. In 1,001 ways before the surgery, it was finding how my world got smaller. Something as simple as, if you can't bend at that major hinge, and thinking of all of the implications, things like I did not wear shoes that laced or a pair of socks for 2 years. Thankfully I live in a place where you wear sandals in the desert all the time. But those little things, and increasingly moving toward places that had to do with my ability to take care of my own hygiene. Can I cut my toenails? Is the toilet high enough? I can get up and down without bars. These things that are so wrapped up in a sense of human dignity. And I didn't realize just how pervasive a particular set of muscles, like hip bones, was to so many other things. So it was a relearning and then some confrontations with being at war with my body in a way I hadn't been before.
How to practice, Katrina, very rusty. Bethan, can I invite you to ask a question, please?
Well, it's not so much a question, it's a resonance, I think. My heart's beating quite quickly listening to you speak. Elyse, is just so powerful. I mean, 2 years ago, I broke my olecranon, which is this bit of me. And as a violinist, I just thought that was the end of things as I knew it. And yeah, you're so right. You can will till the cows come home, but that body-mind connection, it has to come away from that place of fear. And like you, I was the most disciplined person on earth. You know, I spent years practicing for 6 hours a day in front of a mirror, but no amount of will was going to make that bone move. And it was 4 months, and my physios were just a godsend, as well as Feldenkrais practice, which works on the imagination. And so teaching the other arm to move from the movement of this arm every morning, that was my discipline. So I would tell my left arm, look what this right one's doing. Imagine how much that must feel like. And I coaxed it over days and weeks and months to come back to life. And that is embodied learning, I think. So I just wanted to thank you for being so brave. And like yourself, I've not actually written about this yet. I have journals, I've books of notes, and I will write one day, but it still feels very raw. But thank you for bringing that back into my own consciousness. And yeah, I don't know, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Bethan. Chris Poulos has his hand up as well.
Hi, yes. Wow, I love this panel. I was struck by actually also some of the previous panel about this struggle between will and the embodied experience of not quite getting there, right? And then I really wanted to say, Kevin, my dad was an Episcopal priest, and he talked about that experience in some of the ways that you have. I was, as a child, always the rebellious one, kind of felt akin to the prophets being on the outs with the establishment, so to speak. They're always sort of the outcast types, or out on the outer edge types. But I had never heard St. Paul compared to Gollum, and I really loved that. Oh my God. And isn't Gollum's struggle really like another one of those fundamental struggles that we all go through at some point in our lives? Maybe his is a more extreme example because he's deciding whether to kill or not, but he's definitely this good and evil. And the way they show that in the film anyway is literally two people, which is kind of what, like two different versions of him from different camera angles. And they're so very different, which is kind of speaking into a little bit of what you were talking about being the vicar on one hand and you on the other. So I just wanted to comment that. That's all. If you have any response, I'd love to hear it.
Excited to hear what Elise's response is to Chris, and then what Kevin's response is to Chris and Elyse.
I'm just underscoring what Chris said about the Gollum Sméagol is a kind of Saul Paul, right? We just missed the Damascus moment in the middle, but you've got these before and afters, I think. And without going, too far down there, if someone had just helped Sméagol forgive himself for the murder that he committed, perhaps he too might have had this kind of transformation. I'm really interested in this kind of doubled self. Kevin, in particular, as you're linking it to breath, going back to my own kind of Catholic upbringing, the breath of life, to breathe life into. It seems that breath, life, God, human are from the very beginning kind of intermixed, and part of being a vicar is working with those both aspects, both the incarnate and the metaphysical, right, at the same time. I think I'm just really thinking about you working out of both of those places and how you experience them. Is it a this one, that one? Is there a sense of emerging? Kind of where does this thinking reside in your body when you are particularly engaged in sacramental acts or liturgical acts? Did that make sense?
Makes sense. The only thing I didn't have written down this afternoon was to say, and that came into my head, was the Gollum Paul thing. So I probably need to be more confident in speaking off the cuff than I am. But to Chris, the prophet, sure. Clergy have often been, maybe in the past, authoritarian figures. That's why there are lots of historical cases of devastating things. But the prophets of old were establishment figures. They just happened to tell the truth. I have to think more about what Elyse has just said, because, as I always do, and it's quite a blessing to be on the same panel as her. I think I just need to take time. I just need to take the time to reflect, and that working out of the two different things. In many ways, clergy do it, but so do other professionals. So do teachers. So do healthcare professionals. People who work who teach adults or children are constantly having to work with two different things. But I guess for me, as a vicar in rural Wales with sometimes a handful of people in front of me, the temptation for me would be to keep everything happy, not let over 1,000 years of history sort of fold under my watch. And yet trying to be prophetic and say, actually, where do we look for the spirit of all that's good about this place outside? Yeah, I need to think more.
I can see that Gail Leatherby has a hand up there.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you both so much. It was just wonderful. It was a wonderful panel. Elyse, you're making us all feel confessional, so I'm going to join in. About nearly 18 months ago, I tore my Achilles heel, and the recovery has been very, very, very slow and is still ongoing. And this relates to what you were saying and what Bethan has said. It's been really interesting how my body won't do what my mind wants it to, yet at the same time I know it's my mind that's actually stopping my body doing what it should. So that's been a real interesting kind of tension. And Kevin, did I hear you right? Use the word granular autoethnography in your first presentation?
Yes, you heard me right.
I loved it. And I just wondered if you could say a bit more. I just thought it was such a really lovely way to describe the process and the complexity of it all. So both of you, if you'd like to comment, that'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you. Beautiful.
In any order?
I'd like to hear Kevin talk about granular, because I wrote that word down and then thought, began to, kind of play what that might mean. So I would love to hear that as well.
Yes, I could make an offer that is the setting out exactly what it is and how it works is in chapter 2 and 3 of my thesis. I'm quite happy just to send it to people if you want to read it. That's but I guess it began through trying to discover what autoethnography was, and as I said at the very beginning, having chosen this discipline methodology to satisfy the University of Manchester without actually knowing what it was, I did lots of reading and evocative, analytical, and I was struck by a ethnographer who talked about granular ethnography, and I liked that. I liked the slow and measured pace, and actually, while I liked the language of epiphany quite a lot and use it as a cleric, I wanted to say actually all of life hallowed. There is epiphany in everything, so let's see. But if you want to see a full definition, I'm quite happy to send. I know Tim nodded and Elyse nodded, and also Gail. I could send you a copy of the chapter, and it can be in your inbox tonight. So
yeah, yes, please. I love the kind of grittiness as well as the
I think so.
tension. Yeah,
it's probably there's a messiness, and that's why I liked autoethnography as well. That actually it's not sanitized. It's ragged, sharp, and sometimes therefore can't be smoothed down. That actually, when we reflect on our experiences personally, they're always it's always ragged because rugged and sharp because we're reflecting after the moment, but also so much of my autoethnographic reflection revolved around conversations with others. I wanted it to be granular and slow, so that I didn't. That I had a fuller time to not appreciate my own reflections, but also to check whether my reflections of what happened with another were really accurate and fair, not just for them, but for me. That but I will send it to you gladly.
thank you.
If you're, yeah, okay.
Bethan.
I'm aware that, Jamie, you had a second comment to make. Do you want to go first? Because I've already spoken.
So have I, Bethan, but that's very generous. Thank you. Yeah. The question was really directed to Kevin, and it's the same question I asked to Elyse, but I realize it means something very, very different. So the question is, what have you learned about embodiment? But this is really in, what you shared. You pulled the quote from Paul, "It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." And I was interested to hear more about if in your engagement with autoethnography, you have sensed, you have encountered, you have learned, you have embodied Christ in some way through autoethnography? I was interested to hear more about that. You kind of spoke more about your liturgical role. I was interested about your kind of incarnation of Christ through the practice of autoethnography, or through being connected with others within the community.
Oh, sure, we've got 3 minutes left.
Yeah, so if you could just do that in 3 minutes, that'd be great.
That's such a brilliant question, and I think I begin with to say how much I've enjoy engagement with autoethnography and with this group, because I think I first came into it during lockdown when the first online session was, and engaged at length with Sophie Tamas, I believe, who is online about, and because she asked me about being a vicar, but in terms of the openness to autoethnography, has, I think, allowed me to be a better human being, hopefully through that a better priest. And when I do see when I do encounter people who've been bereaved, I'm much slower, and I'm much more open to hearing the full depth of not only the story of the deceased, which I'm trying to do for my job, but their story. And I would probably say that one of the most noticeable things is it takes me a whole lot longer. Everything is slower, 2 or 3 paces, sometimes slower, because well, I think all clergy should be trained in autoethnography, but that's my but I think I would have a bigger battle on my hands to fight to persuade people to do that. But I do, because I think the rich gifts of asking questions, because not least this forced me to this forced me to think about my own times of bereavement in those contexts. And so yeah, I'm not answering your question, but I have successfully filibustered the presentation, because we probably need to stop, don't we, Tim?
It was a difficult question.
No, good question. All the important questions are difficult to answer.
That's a fine statement to come to an end on. If we have time for another question, we could maybe squeak one in. He said, uncertain. Chair?
I mean, I just wanted to, in fact, Jamie is a similar question to what I wanted to ask. And I've put a recommendation of a book in the chat, and it's Marcia Mount Shoup's book called Let the Bones Dance, Embodiment and the Body of Christ. And it addresses this question of where is the flesh and the blood in church. So in my own, I've written a chapter, it's being edited at the moment, and it talks about, in my own upbringing, how the flesh and blood, we were to celebrate Christ's flesh and blood, and yet we had to leave ours outside the church. and there was no kind of the body wasn't allowed to be there. And I just think maybe that answers the question why churches are often empty, because the questions that we have are in our bodies, and there doesn't seem to be a place for the body in the church. But that's another PhD's worth there. So it's worth a reading, and it's from a feminist perspective, and it deals with trauma, and it's wonderful. I would highly recommend it. Thank you.
And it's available for £8.93 on the dreaded Amazon, actually. having just checked.
Oh, thanks ever so much for that, Bethan, as well. And I look forward to seeing your chapter emerge soon. Well, I'll be very interested to read that. It resonated very strongly. What a brilliant panel. Thank you, both Kevins and Elyse. Because everybody please show their appreciation.
And thank you, Tim, for chairing. That was brilliant.
Oh, thank you. I shall take my questions home with me and send them by email to this person. As a good chair does.
The two of us.
That brings this panel to a close. Are we to all make ourselves available in